Welcome to the Twin Cities Business Show. Today, we're hanging out in that tractor in front of the state capitol, talking to Chris Abbott, the CEO of Pivot Bio, about their innovative fertilizer technology and where they're headed as a company. Welcome to the Twin Cities Business Show. We are here today in a tractor with Chris Abbott, the CEO of Pivot Bio. Chris, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks, Charlie.
So, we are sitting here in a tractor. Can you tell me why?
Yeah, so we're here at the Capitol today in what we call our 1 Million Thanks Tour. This is a tour, as you can see, you're in the prime seat, the buddy seat here, and this tractor is traveling essentially from New Orleans to the Twin Cities. It's become a very non-linear route, meandering throughout the country, going into communities all over the United States, highlighting issues that farmers face or opportunities that farmers face. The premise is 1 million thanks. So we want people to engage and thank the farmers that feed, fuel, and clothe essentially the world, but certainly focusing here on farmers in the U.S. And we'll have folks sitting where you're sitting today in the buddy seat, and a chance for me to spend time interviewing them, asking them questions around things like rural community viability, topics that matter to agriculture, farmer mental health. And so the buddy seat will be filled with policymakers, technologists, farmers, change makers, folks that have an ability to influence the discussion, the dialogue around agriculture.
That's great. Thank you. You guys have had an exciting year. Got it. Pivot Bio officially moved to Minnesota. And, you know, reading about your technology, what you guys are doing is really fascinating. I think, you know, we've seen the global fertilizer market rocked by a bunch of geopolitical issues, huge increased run-up in costs. There can be environmental concerns with fertilizer. Can you talk a little bit about what Pivot Bio does and why your technology is unique?
For sure. So as you mentioned, fertilizer is critical. Fertilizer, a fact that most people don't know, but synthetic fertilizer feeds about half the planet. So it's a critical input that we need to grow a crop for the world. What we do, though, is we take bacteria, so we call it a biological source of nitrogen. We take those bacteria that are naturally occurring. We use modern technology to make them fix nitrogen. Fixation of nitrogen is taking nitrogen from the air. So the most abundant thing in this cab, it's 78% nitrogen, and it converts it to nitrogen fertilizer, a form usable by plants. And so the bacteria are doing that, and they live on the root in the case of what we're describing in the corn plant, but corn, wheat, cotton, sorghum, those are all big cereal crops that are important to the world and the crops that we address. And so those microbes, those little bacteria, those little factories that are living on the root system are doing that throughout the season. And so it prevents runoff or volatilization of that nitrogen leaving. It prevents the plant being short, helps prevent the plant being short nitrogen when it needs it going through those growth stages. So as we would say, it's the highest performing, highest value nitrogen fertilizer in the world.
That's great. And I think, you know, for folks that don't know a lot about fertilizer, the fertilizer market, a couple numbers really jumped out to me. You know, synthetic fertilizers are responsible for 1% to 2% of carbon emissions, and often half of applied fertilizers can run off almost immediately, leave the crop, you capture none, and it goes who knows where. So can you talk a little bit about those 2 points and kind of how you guys and your technology works to address them?
Most definitely. So as you described, it's a big chunk of the global economy, either from an economic or from a sustainability perspective, as you're highlighting. So depending on the stats, somewhere between 1 and 2 on the low end and 3 and 4 on the high end of global greenhouse comes from the production and application of fertilizer. As you described, although synthetic fertilizer is important and it feeds half the world, it's imperfect. So this is a 100-year-old technology that we use today, making synthetic nitrogen and synthetic fertilizer. And so yes, to your point, and as we as Minnesotans have observed, those fertilizers can end up in places they're not supposed to be, rivers, lakes, drinking water supplies. And so we're working very closely, not just our company, but many of our partners, even some of our fertilizer and distribution partners, to bring a better crop nutrition solution for farmers. What does that result in? Well, what it results in is you get a better fertility program for that crop, typically resulting in higher yields. You also get less waste. And so fertilizer is the number one bucket of ag input expense for a farmer. It's really painful if you lose half of that, right, in a low margin business. And so being able to drive up the efficiency of fertilizer with technologies like ours, not just bring up the productivity curve for the farmer, but also bring up profitability and help them manage risk. All the while, to your original point, improving sustainability and some of the outcomes for soil and water.
So to try to put a finer point on that, your product sticks to crops, which makes it cheaper, which means that you have to use less of it, which means that, one of the major input costs for these grains that ultimately are a major contributor and driver of food costs overall are lower. So in essence, if you guys are able to really scale, there's a very clear line through which you guys could, at scale, actually materially bring down the cost of food.
Most definitely. So today, our product, depending on the crop, replaces about 20 to 25% of the rate of all applied nitrogen for that crop. So we use corn as an example. If the average corn farmer is going to apply 160 pounds of nitrogen across all their sources of synthetic, about 25% of that now comes from our crop. So it allows them to reduce some of the rate of those more expensive, more volatile synthetic sources. Some folks use it over the top, but in general, it's 20 to 25%. So to your point, you can imagine our product, actually the Monday after the invasion and the bombings began in Iran, we actually lowered price. So our products are made in the United States, shipped within 24 hours, so essentially on-demand fertilizer. Think about this, Charlie. Your iPhone is 120 acres of our product. It's in a dust. Think of like a Ziploc bag dust that goes into a seed treatment machine. And to your point, those seeds that come out the backside that a farmer would be planting are now coated with the product. And so that form factor allows us to ship that on the fly and really extract cost out of the system. And to your point, you think about where that ends up. Certainly our food, certainly the protein supply chain, when you think of 40% of corn alone goes into feed, but also fuel. Most people don't think about where does corn grow when you drive around, out in the country. 40% is feed and think about protein, 40% is fuel, and 20% is everything else, basically food ingredients. And so most of what you see when you're driving down, 35 or in rural parts of this country are not actually corn that you eat. that ends up somewhere else in the value chain. And so that cost structure can impact so many things in our global economy.
I want to ask a little bit about your journey. When did you first learn about the company, first learn about the technology? Talk about your journey with Pivot Bio specifically and kind of what your first exposure was.
Yeah, so I've been in the ag and ag tech space for almost 15 years. Actually got into the ag tech space about 10 years ago, advising a business that was a software business around nitrogen use efficiency. And that kind of got me hooked on what I would say the in-season nitrogen and fertilizer challenge that existed. And in that journey, met Karsten and Alvin, our co-founders, almost 10 years ago. So in 2018, I actually invested in the business. Didn't have revenue, didn't even have sort of real life customers. It was a lot of really good lab and proof point data, but I believe so strongly that we can apply modern technology to real challenges that ag faces. And at the time, what I was predicting is we were sitting in front of a large innovation cycle in ag. We had seen it in other markets like energy. We just hadn't seen it in earnest in agriculture in some areas like fertilizer. And so given the importance of crop nutrition and what that means for the global economy, what it means for markets like feed and protein and fuel and all the things that ag touches. Sometimes people don't appreciate that where it shows up. There had to be a better way to address some of these challenges for growers. And so in 2023, I decided to join as the CEO and partner with the team to really help scale, bring in some of the large strategic partners that I had worked with very closely. And so here we are 3 years later, and the technology continues to scale. It's been used on over 20 million acres. And so really having a strong impact for farmers all around the U.S. And then in the coming months and in the coming years, Canada, Brazil, places like Europe, they're all changing their regulatory frameworks to allow new technology to come in. And so we want to be there to support those growers as well.
Really interesting. I want to ask a little bit about, the founder CEO relationship can be really interesting. It's sort of a familiar story. Somebody founds the company, another person joins sort of as a leader to help scale it. Can you talk a little bit about what your relationship has been like with them and, how you guys navigate some of the challenges of, you joining somebody's baby and then really having to lead it, but at the same time, you all still having to be very collaborative.
Certainly, and I've seen that go well and not well over the course of my career. I feel pretty blessed. Our two co-founders, Karsten and Alvin, who started this business 15 years ago, are just awesome. I mean, they had a vision for what could we do with life science technology and with synthetic biology in this space. Our relationship, as I say, no pun intended in a tractor, had a rolling start. I was an investor for 5 years, and so we got to develop a lot of a relationship with a lot of things that we were working on as a business, and so we were sort of in the thick of it together. Yes, it's always hard, and I always sort of feel and can be empathetic for what a founder goes through as businesses start to grow. But that's a natural progression, right? As businesses continue to scale, inevitably, it goes into the hands of someone suited to take it on its next leg of the journey. And there may be a day where that happens to me. And so the most success that a business can have is it continues to progress, and then we all support it, because Pivot's bigger than any one of us. But I feel really fortunate. Karsten and Alvin, our two co-founders, still work in our business today, are integral in driving some of the innovative things we're doing, not just with the products, but with AI and other things. And so I feel really lucky. But our relationship extends well beyond when I came in, and I think that's been an opportunity for me to earn my stripes in saying this is what I can bring to the next leg of the business, and for them with their not just amazing technical skills, but they're just great guys and high humility scores. They said, look, this is great for Pivot, and so we'll support it, and it's been a great relationship.
That's great. I want to think a little bit about scale, right? This is a gigantic global market. And I would imagine to a certain extent, the cap on you guys is not going to be your ambitions or the market. It's just going to be how fast can you get big. And so I want to ask a little bit about, where is your output right now, and where do you guys want to get in the next couple of years, and how do you achieve the kind of scale that you need without going too far, too fast?
It's a great question. So you're spot on. We're not short ambition or ideas. We are short typically time, people, or money. And so what we face today is really some of those typical scaling challenges. So as I mentioned, our business is entirely in the U.S., but about to be going global in other places in North and South America. Today we can produce about 35 million acres of product. So we're pretty well covered for the next couple of years. But honestly, the amount of partners and growers that are coming to us, we're already planning for, okay, well, what is next? And to your earlier point, Charlie, when you think about the geopolitical conflict and disruption, you're never ready for some of those things. And so we're starting to think through supply chain scaling. The plan we have in place right now is to go from 35 million acres to 150 million acres.
Well, what time horizon?
We want to be ready to roll in about 36 months if we needed to for 150 million acres. I'll be pleasantly surprised if we're at 150 million acres commercially in 3 years, but you just don't know. You have to be willing to scale. Our business is great, though. It's outsourced fermentation, so these products are brewed kind of like you brew beer in fermenters. Obviously, you apply world-class science and life science tools to that, but to give you a mental image, think of fermentation facilities. And so very small footprint, and that allows us to flex capacity up and down very quickly, especially as acreage grows. And so we can ship anywhere, as I mentioned, in the U.S. in 24 hours. We want to hold true to that because it allows a just-in-time supply chain for fertilizer, which is very difficult, right? When you think about fertilizer coming from places like Russia or the Middle East, it takes 90 days to get here up the river. Well, a lot of price and geopolitical risk and weather risk can happen along that journey. You can order our product and I can ship it to you tomorrow, and you can be running it through your seed treater and then planting. That's a very powerful lever for farmers. And so we plan to scale to 150 million acres and beyond, because we know that corn, wheat, cotton, sorghum, when you look at North America and South America, there's a couple 100 million acres or more and growing. And so we have to be able to satisfy that demand.
You guys are out talking to farmers across the country all the time. How are they feeling right now?
Yeah, it's tough. farmers were already under margin pressure heading into the conflict in Iran. And as I mentioned, as soon as that happened, a lot of input costs in the fertilizer complex in particular started to spike. And here we are today, whatever we are, five months after the war, feels like it's been 5 years. And prices are still higher than where they were last year. So yeah, certainly they've come down, but they've come down at a quiet time in the year. We're about to move into the fall season where fall fertilizer in the U.S., South America starts to buy more nitrogen. We have India that continues to buy nitrogen. So that just soaks up a lot of that global supply. And so as we roll around to the spring, prices are likely to be higher than where they were last spring, pre-war again, because we're already above trend line. We're already at that level. And so as demand picks up in a commodity market, we can't just magically make more supply. And so you start to see that pinch point. And in conjunction with that, you haven't seen a massive spike in grain price. When Russia and Ukraine conflict first broke out, you had the price of grain. You had wheat and corn, those commodities spike. So farmers made more revenue. In this case, they didn't spike, but the input cost went up. And so you're just squeezing that margin for farmers, which is why one of the reasons we're doing the 1 Million Thanks Tour now. Farmers need the support more than ever. But also, we want to help bring solutions. We don't just want to bring awareness. More and more, you're seeing awareness building in our industry around opportunities or challenges. But how do we bring solutions? And so that's why the Buddy Seat is a powerful tool, because it'll be folks from the largest health systems in the world talking about how do you deploy mental health resources at scale digitally? How do you use new tools from outside the ag industry or outside the healthcare industry coming in to help address acute challenges in rural communities? And so this isn't just an awareness tour solving issues at a critical time. It's actually about putting people in that seat that have solutions and then using the platform to deploy those solutions so that we can help either address opportunities or prevent some challenges, help solve some challenges that farmers face.
That's great. Why did you guys move the company to Minnesota?
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory there. We were founded in Berkeley, and there was some just awesome talent, technical talent that helped found our business there. But as we've scaled, I'm a strong believer that you've got to be where your customer is. So our business headquarters, as you described here in the Twin Cities out in Minnetonka and the Carlson Towers, and a facility equally as important down in St. Louis where we ship. We want all of our teammates to be close to customers. And so when we look at our employee base, all of our team members, folks that are typically remote are probably in places where customers are. They're our field team serving our customers. But whether you're in Minnetonka or St. Louis, you're a half hour probably from one of our customers. At least I know you're within a half hour from one of our customers. We also get access to great talent here in the Twin Cities, and we have great partners. I mean, Minnesota punches well above its weight, not just in the Fortune 500s that are here, but specifically the ag and food companies that are here, and many of them are current or about to be potential partners of ours. And so to be where we have access to talent, where our customers are, where our partners are, is a no-brainer.
So there are a lot of interesting things sort of going on in this space in Minnesota right now. Where do you see, this this industry as a whole headed? And I think, I'm thinking specifically about initiatives like Embold and things like that. Where do you see some of this stuff going in the state, and what do you think? What sorts of things do you think will be coming out of Minnesota in the next couple of years?
Yeah, Minnesota's done a great job. You mentioned Embold, Naturally Minnesota, the work that Greater MSP is working on. It's just there's so much going on in and around food and ag. Now the trick is how do we get it all to fold together, right, in a big way and start to amplify that. But you're seeing just great innovation. You're seeing a capital flow into the sector here in the Twin Cities. You should expect more headlines for Minnesota homegrown capital supporting innovation here that will have an ag bend to it. We know that there's folks working on that, and I just think it's awesome. Like that's exactly what we need. We need large capital providers and successful entrepreneurs reinvesting back in our region. And so you should expect that all of us continue to work together, continue to tell the story of our industry, and continue to find ways to get people to engage, because Minnesota is a top 5 ag state in terms of grain and commodities in the United States. I mean, it is core to the DNA of many folks in this state. And so we need to continue to drive innovation, working with the university and others, continue to support entrepreneurs as investors for new technology, and then as strategic partners play that role in helping them scale. And we can have a huge impact at global scale. We feel like we're just scratching the surface of this as a company, and so if we can play a catalyst to not just grow our business and serve more farmers, but bring other people along and allow it to be a platform for other entrepreneurs, that's what we want to do.
So we're here today in front of the state capitol in a tractor, which is not where I expected to be on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard this common refrain from a lot of people that, you know, oftentimes they go to the capitol, they ask for things, and they feel like people here might not be listening to them. Have you found a pretty receptive audience there? And talk a little bit about what your relationship has been like with the whole policy arena in Minnesota.
Yeah, so policy is always tricky, right? I mean, folks and policymakers are balancing a million things. Typically, we've seen a good response, though. I mean, and frankly, we need to, because ag is important to the state. Most of the constituents, especially outside of where we're sitting today, are in rural communities where ag is arguably the most important industry. And so I think that matters to policymakers, and I think we probably punch above our weight in getting that engagement. But we've got to continue that. We've got to continue to focus on solutions for farmers. We've got to continue to focus on how do we bolster and invest in innovation. We've got to continue to focus on soil and water health and the things that matter to our state. I mean, land of 10,000, 11,000 lakes, water quality matters. It's an important piece of our daily lives. And so, we started to see some traction from policymakers. I hope that momentum, though, frankly, continues to build and focus on some of these key issues and make Minnesota a leader, because these issues do matter. We are seeing traction in other states. We're starting to even see traction at the federal level. Obviously, there's a farm bill in motion here, but this is a chance for Minnesota to be a leader and help be a driver of that. And so it's part of the reason we're here today to drive that engagement with our policymakers in our state, but also allow people to come in. I mean, the state and the government is not a big scary thing all the time, right? You can engage at the state level or even at the federal level, and we've had some pretty good reception here in Minnesota.
So if you could wave a magic wand and push through one policy at the state capitol, what would it be?
Yeah, so I would think bigger than just our business here. I would create a common platform in the state of Minnesota in crop nutrition technology. So what does that look like? It could be funding, but it certainly is awareness and programs. This is using policy as a lever. We don't always just have to deploy state dollars. We can actually use policy as a lever to drive innovation and adoption and leverage what we have here. So let me give you an example. The future of fertilizer is not going to only be big facilities, big Haber-Bosch facilities. It'll be companies like Pivot Bio and others. Yord is another good example here, spun out of the University of Minnesota, also uses biologics to solve critical challenges. Those technologies need a place to live, grow, manufacture, and distribute. Well, grow, manufacture, and distribute are what this state does well in agriculture, right? You think about the Cargills and the CHSs and Land O'Lakes and Winfield United. There are some awesome partners here. And so what I'd love to see is the evolution for crop nutrition to start and live right here in the Twin Cities. And so that's working with the university to have programs that allow students to drive innovation, create new businesses, a place where capital can convene, and then a place where real products actually get manufactured and distributed. It will take some capital. The state could invest a small amount of capital in the grand scheme of things to do it, but we need a place to convene. We need policy that supports innovation going out. Certainly on Minnesota farm fields, there's several million acres that we can address right now and have an impact on. And so the state should have a crop nutrition platform solution here, and we want to be a part of helping drive that.
Fantastic. And finally, there's been a lot of conversation about the farm bill at the federal level. What do you guys want to see come out of the farm bill that's being discussed right now?
It's a little bit like my ask to build a crop nutrition solution here in Minnesota. We're actually working to help, as I would call it, future-proof the farm bill. So there's a number of policies. There's a number of initiatives. Think of things like 45Z in biofuels, for example, that are trying to drive adoption of new technologies to improve outcomes, whether that's grower outcomes, sustainability and environmental outcomes. But we need, at the federal level, we need the standards and the on-farm practices to be open. Right now, they're very restrictive. They're written with old technology in mind. What we would like to see is a number of the policies, whether that's things tying to NRCS, on-farm practice standards, and others, to continue to focus on new technology. And there's a huge adoption, momentum around adoption, and openness to do that. So we are really excited about what could come from the Farm Bill for new technologies all around agriculture, from precision application to drones to biologics. You think about the impact AI can have on agriculture and on those commodity markets. It's just enormous. And so we hope that policy starts to get a little bit more out in front in terms of what are some of those solutions that we want to support going out on the field and helping drive awareness for growers through NRCS, through the great work that the USDA does. And so that should live in the Farm Bill. I'm not a believer that we need to throw money at a problem necessarily. What I think we should do is we should continue to support the innovators and folks that are trying to drive and build technology which leverage private capital in the private markets. But policy is a nice wrapper typically that fits around some of these challenges. And so when you think about biofuels, when you think about more sustainable and less variability in terms of risk, in terms of food production, protein production, technology solves those challenges. And so how do we continue to push the boundary of getting technology included in these conversations? And the Farm Bill is just one start. If that gets over the line, you can imagine there's a ripple effect for things that could come from it.
Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for